President Trump asked the American people for 4 more years. Hello and welcome to a special edition of Truth TV. I'm Lisa K. Donner. On today's episode, Republicans took to the stage this week in an effort to convince the American public to give President Donald Trump 4 more years as Commander-in-Chief. In an impassioned and wide-ranging speech, the president hammered away at his challenger Joe Biden and set out a plan for the next term in office. Following Mr. Trump's remarks at the RNC, Liberty Nation live-streamed analysis and commentary with our panel of experts. We recorded this discussion and present it to you in its entirety here on Truth TV, America's top online conservative news program. Enjoy.
Truth is making a comeback.
Live from the nation's capital, what did the president say and how did he say it? Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Nation live stream panel of experts tonight as we analyze President Trump's acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief of Liberty Nation, and joining me tonight are Liberty Nation's chief political correspondent, Graham J. Noble. Welcome, Graham.
Hi, Lisa.
National correspondent, Sarah Cowgill.
Nice to be here.
Political columnist Joe Schaefer.
Hello, hello.
And the host of Liberty Nation's radio, Liberty Nation Radio, which airs on dozens of stations nationwide on the Radio America Network. He's also our Washington political columnist, Tim Donner.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, guys, that was an hour and 10-minute speech. I don't know if that is historic in its time, but we're going to try to stay perky despite it's 11:40 on the East Coast in the nation's capital tonight. Let's begin with a general overview before we get into the specifics. Tim, do you think the president made a good case for the next 4 years?
You know what I kept thinking as I was watching this, how painful it must have been for CNN and MSNBC and CBS and ABC and all the rest to have to carry this, because this was an absolutely devastating steamroller of a speech. The president carved up Biden and the Democrats like a Thanksgiving turkey. I mean, the case that he made for his own administration was strong, but the average person tuning in and watching it unfiltered could see the composite of what the Democrats have represented over these last 4 years. And when you hear it all lined up back to back like tonight, it is absolutely devastating. And I'd be very surprised if the president doesn't get a fairly substantial bump beyond the usual measure in the polls.
Joe, do you think he laid out a coherent vision for the next 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, it was an incumbent speech delivered from the White House. It was a 4 more years speech. So he went through it was kind of a long laundry list of accomplishments and things. Again, I thought it was too long. I thought the convention was too long. But, this is what they went with, that, kind of competent leadership. We're getting things done. We're going to keep getting things done. I personally would have liked to have seen the combative Trump from 2016. They're not going that way. It should be fine against Biden, who is a historically awful candidate. And I think that's what they're relying on. And so we'll see what happens going forward. That's their strategy, 4 more years for the incumbent.
Graham, how would you compare, the president's speech to Joe Biden's last week?
I don't think there's any, it's hard to actually even compare the two speeches. I mean, they were universes apart. Biden's speech was, I think, very predictable in that it was very negative. It was very much a speech based on the idea that unless you elect me and if you allow this orange man badge to remain in office for another 4 years, then it's going to be the end of civilization, the end of democracy. We're all doomed. This speech, I thought it was, apart from the fact that I think it touched on all the right points, and I was a little worried at the beginning that he was going to be a little dry and too too bound to the teleprompter. But actually, I think it turned out to be really good, and he covered everything he needed to cover, which I thought was great. But also, I thought there was a tone to it, which was almost, not only was it far more optimistic about the future than Biden's speech by 1,000 degrees, but also I almost found there was an underlying tone of it being very dismissive of a potential Biden presidency. I really thought the whole tone of the speech was, we've already achieved these great things and we're going to continue to achieve them. But there's this other guy who has been a career failure as a politician. And I just found, I thought it was kind of the underlying tone was, whereas Biden's speech was, Donald Trump is a horrible human being, Trump's speech was, Joe Biden is just, he's just a waste of time. I mean, really, are we going to go there, or are we going to carry on doing what we've been doing? And so I thought, a huge difference between the two, of course.
Well, Sarah, he certainly was, I got somber and sober throughout. That seemed to be his tone. Whether he laid out his vision or attacked his opponent, it seems like he kind of did both. Did he do it effectively, you think?
Oh, I think he did. I mean, he was serious. He wasn't, the rallying cry. He was serious because he's in the middle of a pandemic, obviously, and he laid out those points very well, what he was doing, how they were going to handle it, where we were going with the vaccine. I thought he handled that relatively well for, a really flamboyant, bombastic personality. He left no stone unturned, not a one. Everything was covered, from how he got to the presidency to what he had done during his presidency to all the fights and everything that he had to put up with. And I thought he covered that extremely well, maybe a little too well, but extremely well, and still had a little twinkle and a little personality, to stop and joke a little bit here and there. But I think he had a serious tone.
Yeah, it sounded like somebody gave him the do not go off script. Whatever you do, stay on the teleprompter. It seemed to me that Biden's speech was about Biden, who he was, what his life experience was, his tragedies in life. It seemed that Trump's speech was about us. And I felt that difference. Tim, did you notice that?
Well, what I notice is now trying to look at this from 30,000 feet now that the convention's over, Trump's speech is in the can, and we've seen 4 days of the Democrats as well, is that the Republicans are a party of individuals. The Democrats are a party of groups. And the individuals on display in this convention, all the way down to Ivanka Trump introducing him, but all the everyday heroes, the people whose stories made you want to cry tonight. I don't think I'll ever forget the presentation by Ann Dorn, the wife of the slain St. Louis police captain who was gunned down by one of these savage criminals. And the story she told, the individual story of what happened to her, was absolutely, it was devastating. It was heartrending. And it was those individual stories that I think made the convention as a whole, fairly a triumph, I would say. I thought that the president had more of a presidential countenance than he probably has ever had. The speech was more presidential in the traditional term, I think, than it ever has been. But the way that he went after Biden, calling him a Trojan horse for socialism, you're going to hear a lot about the Biden-Bernie manifesto. That's something that he's going to push out. And I think, he said China would own the country if Biden is president. Biden would be made in China, whereas he's made in the USA. He talked about how 13 members of the Biden team bailed out these rioters and looters. And Kamala Harris has been linked to an organization that's done that. So, I mean, he just laid out the case in crystal clear terms. And I got left with the impression, and I've said this for some time, that this election may very well in the end not even come down to Trump. It will come down to a revulsion, maybe too much of a exaggeration, but a rejection certainly of what the Democrats represent as laid out by Trump tonight. Because again, when you put it all together in a composite, it's a frightening picture of what the Democratic Party has become.
Let me just say, in 2016, it felt to me like, and jump in here, anybody, that it felt to me like Donald Trump was running against a person. Hillary Clinton was a force. She was very much someone who made up her own mind. She's an individual, whether you liked her or not. Now I feel like Donald Trump's running against a party, a group. Not really. I mean, Joe Biden had a white calendar week. I can't remember the last time a presidential candidate had a white calendar week in August going into September. That's shocking. And I realize we have the COVID, but, you know, I don't know. Did anyone else sense that?
Very much so. Yes, and it's like I said, that the Democratic Party, Biden is just a front man for a radical party, the way that the Republicans are depicting it, that he's just a stooge for Bernie Sanders, who said, I mean, Bernie Sanders said himself, Joe Biden will be the most progressive president in history. And months before that, Biden had said that himself, and they're going to roll that stuff out. I mean, all the things like raising his hand, along with all the other Democrats, to support taxpayer-funded health care for illegal immigrants, all this stuff is going to be bombarding the American people. So by the time it's over, they'll be, I think, more rejecting the Democrats even than embracing Trump.
Well, you know, go ahead, Joe.
I just think that he's got the best of both worlds here. In 2016, he was able to run anti-establishment. Joe Biden's been around 47 years. He gets to continue doing that. 2020, he gets to run against this far left nuttiness, because that is what Joe Biden is, as Trump said tonight, the Trojan horse for it. And that's a great line. That line's going to work for the next 3 months. Joe Biden's the Trojan horse for all these lunatics from the far left, AOC and the whole squad. That's going to be money for him going on. So he's got, it's an ideal situation. Anti-establishment, Joe Biden's been around 47 years, and what has he done? And all this left-wing hysteria that Joe Biden is attaching himself to. Maybe that's why he is being more restrained than I would wish for, because it's pretty easy when it's all laid out there for you. You don't really need to attack a party that is just immolating on its own. So maybe that's why we have a more measured tone. And in that regard, that you can make an argument that it is a good strategy.
Sarah, there couldn't be a bigger contrast, could there?
No. I mean, you've got last week that was complete doom and gloom without a hint of hope, you know, facing Armageddon. If Trump is ever reelected, we got to get rid of the guy. And then this week you have a similar sort of convention with a little more life to it. You know, you had Biden talking about Biden and his tragedies, and it was like, God, you feel kind of sorry for the guy. And, you know, he's obviously suffering something cognitively. And then you've got Trump, who doesn't talk about himself. He talks about his administration and that he's for the American people. He's the only thing standing between the American people and communism, basically, is what he said tonight. And it resonates with people. I mean, he already had his base. Now, whether or not that's going to translate and everybody's still going to be divided down the same lines they are, I cannot predict that. I do believe that Trump hit it really hard tonight. And I think, as Tim said, he looked very presidential. He didn't look like the bombastic, anti-establishment, get in there, kick butt, and go home. He looked like, I'm in it to win it. I'm here to stay. And I really think that's a big difference than last week.
Graham, do you really think he came out swinging? He seemed a little paced, and to me, again, I mentioned earlier that I thought the convention, they did a spectacular job. I thought Ronna McDaniel did an amazing job bringing together the ordinary people. I think the people were the show. They were the stars.
I didn't see him. I mean, that normal bombastic, combative self wasn't apparent at all. I mean, he made reference to a few things here and there, but he really stayed the course. He followed the speech. It was awfully long, but he did follow to the word. He didn't go offline. He didn't use horrible nicknames. He didn't make fun of people. He just pointed things out.
Maybe that's why I'm so bummed out. I don't know.
That's no new nicknames. We watched for an hour and 10. But in fairness, he's expended them all on Biden. Sleepy Joe, 1% Joe, Slow Joe. That's sort of what they settled on. Yeah, I think even Trump may have run out of possible monikers for his opponent.
And that hug and kiss moment was a gem, though. I mean, that was when he said he's hugging and kissing the workers, then he goes back to Washington and stabs them in the backs for China. I mean, it was funny, it was witty, and it got
How about the line where he said Joe Biden? I mean, he was mocking. How Joe Biden is so compassionate and all this stuff, and that's all that he can offer people is compassion. And he said he calls himself an ally of the light. And then he talks about the power failure in California, and he says, how can you be an ally of the light when you can't even keep the lights on? I mean, I thought that was just, pierced like a sword through the Democrats.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that there was one thing about the tone of Trump's speech that may well serve him well in the eyes of the American people, those who watch it or those who watch it later. And that is that, so many people are turned off by the personal nature, the personal animosity between politicians. If there's two things I think that members of the public don't like about politicians, it's one, when they spend all their time talking about themselves, and the second thing is when they spend all of their time just going after their opponents personally. I mean, you can go after your political opponents on the issues, and that's fine. Everyone expects that. But when you make it so personal, as the Democrats and everyone on the left tends to do now, and I think there was a tone, the whole of Trump's speech was very much not about personalities. It wasn't about him, as Sarah alluded to. Not only was it not about him, but it was also not about, ridiculing Joe Biden personally or tearing him down personally. The speech was very much about, this is what we are going to achieve compared to what Biden's party is trying to achieve if they get power. And so I think maybe that maybe resonate, that lack of not only, it's all about me, but also that lack of my opponent is a horrible person. And I think that's almost refreshing in the eyes of many Americans, I think.
I think that's well said. All righty, we are out of time. A special shout out to our viewers. Thank you so much for joining us on this special Liberty Nation live stream. Thank you, Joe, Tim, Sarah, and Graham for being here tonight and for your wonderful wit and wisdom. On behalf of our technical team, Mark and Phil, who have now been up for 24 hours, I'm Lisa K. Donner, reminding you to tune in to LibertyNation.com for original conservative news and commentary. And remember, liberty all the time and everywhere. Good night, everybody.
Truth is making a comeback.
And that's it for another edition of Truth TV. Thanks so much for tuning in. And remember to look for Liberty Nation in your favorite search engine. Subscribe to our popular conservative news daily briefing and our new Roku channel. And remember, liberty all the time and everywhere.
Ready, set, go.
Stay ahead of the curve with LibertyNation.com, because we put the power of the press in your hands. With one click,
LibertyNation.com.
Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news
And remember, liberty
today.
all the time and everywhere.
Liberty Nation connected the dots between a Chinese research biolab and a wet market where COVID-19 was supposedly discovered 2 months before the MSM. We were first to alert you of a serious attack on gun rights in Virginia. LN honed in on the Biden-Burisma scandal months before it hit the papers. We brought you exclusive interviews from the border.
We're looking at people just rising up.
Liberty Nation was on the ground in London,
Trump rally in front of the American Embassy.
bringing you on-the-scene reports about Brexit. LN reported that COVID-19 was more virulent but less deadly weeks before others. LibertyNation.com delivers tomorrow's news today with LNTV's Liberty Nation Radio, the Uprising and Rabbit Hole podcasts, and dozens of insightful original articles and a new Roku channel. Stay ahead of the curve with LibertyNation.com and get tomorrow's news today. LibertyNation.com.
Truth is making a comeback. Visit us at LibertyNation.com.